Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kosala, also known as Marventus, bringing you yet another look at Rifts. Now, this we're looking at right now is my main character that I play in Rifts, which is a Chloromancer mage called Marvina. And what we are going to be doing today is taking an in-depth look at soul choices for the Chloromancer. A very odd, highly interesting class to play. The Chloromancer is basically a combat healing mage. And generally I tend to play healing or tank classes in massively multiplayer games, and I opted for healers in this game. However, the game recommends combinations of souls, and one really wonderful thing about the Ascended Soul class system that exists in Rifts is the fact that you can pretty much mix and match the souls that tend to work best for you with your personal playstyle, and which is exactly what I've done here. And I was going to share that information with you because this is a highly unorthodox combination of souls for the Chloromancer class. Unorthodox considering the fact that what has been generally talked about as the best combination is not the one that I use because of my particular playstyle. Now, taking into account the fact that I'm level 24, I've decided to go with this particular healing spec you see in front of you. That is the main tree as the Chloromancer, and then subclassed into Warlock and Dominator for this particular healing role. Now, the Warlock, let's talk about the Warlock first. I had to pick a third soul. Out of all the souls that are out there really are none that I thought were particularly interesting, but I picked the Warlock for one ability only, and that is this, the Life Leech ability that you get directly upon picking that particular soul. What it does is it does damage to your target, to the target of the spell, while returning healing to you at 30% of the damage done. This is generally useful as a self-heal in parties, in groups, so you don't need to bother healing yourself. That is the only reason why I picked it. It is basically a choice of the lesser of the available evils, and there really is no third class that's particularly meaningful, or third soul that's particularly meaningful, but I tended to go with this one. I do recommend that choice because actually it does help out. So the Life Leech is nice to have. If we take the second role, the Dominator one, was also a choice made after much experimenting. A couple of key reasons went into this. One was this talent up here, Acumen, that increases your intelligence when maxed out to 10%, which is really quite excellent. And then this critical one, which is Transmogrify, which comes in extremely handy. It's basically crowd controlling by turning the target into a squirrel. And this does come in pretty damn handy, actually. Now, how many points you get in this tree is really up to you. I personally was not don't necessarily require to get more than down to here, because the mana wrench ability is quite nice to boost your mana while you're in combat. Now, this particular ability works quite nicely in the fact that it will even work if you target an assailant that does not have mana. It'll just return less mana that way. And if you target a casting mob, it'll return quite a lot of mana. It's an excellent way to stay buffed up while, say, in boss fights, or actually even in group fights. So you don't need to do much downtime between the runs, between the groups. And then this ability, Reflective Command, is actually quite nice as well, because it reflects the next incoming attack within 10 seconds, the next incoming spell attack within 10 seconds back at the caster. This ability, Thunderblast, is also pretty nice. If something were to come charging at you, it's an instant cast spell that knocks the target back, gives your tank a little breathing room to actually go out and grab it and generate some threat on it before it starts to hit on you, which is actually a very, very nice combination of spells. There is some nice stuff here in the Dominator tree that is worth having, and this is absolutely at least as far as I'm concerned, the optimal choice for the secondary soul. I think that the original class combination that was recommended by the game was Warlock, Chloromancer, and then, let me just take a look at the list here, it was Archon, which I found to be epically useless, actually. Alright, so the Dominator tree was actually quite nice. Now keep in mind that at some point, because I've actually put in a huge amount of points in the Chloromancer tree, and I'll continue to do so, but at some point it will stop you from adding points because there's a limit to how much you can have before you level again. So eventually you're going to have to pick one of these two trees to put points in, and I definitely decided to go with the Dominator tree. It's highly unlikely I'm going to be putting any points into the Warlock tree. Now, let's get to the good stuff. The Chloromancer healing style. Like I said, very, very special healing style, and I'm really, really digging it. In fact, I was digging it so much, I didn't see the point of a DPS spec until I was like level 19 or 20. I was soloing in the Chloromancer spec as well. Now, I don't recommend that you do that, because stuff does die pretty damn slowly, and you don't really want them to die slowly, you want them to die quickly. But I simply couldn't find a DPS spec combination that I was in the slightest bit interested in until I was about level 19-20 when I finally found the combo I liked. And we'll get to that in just a second. But let's take a look at healing in the Chloromancer style. How do you heal? Your main healing spell is actually Vile Spores, which is a combat spell that you hurl at an enemy. So the question is, how do you heal? That is very, very important. Radiant Spores. When a target is affected by Radiant Spores, and you cast Vile Spore or Vile, is it Vile Spore? Yes, Vile Spores at it, it heals a certain percentage of the damage done to the entire party. So it's an AoE healing that is handled by buff versus buff plus combat. So you debuff the target with Radiant Spores, and then you pummel away with Vile Spores, and you will do AoE healing within the range of target. Very, very useful. Also, this Withering Vine, incredibly useful because your tank and any other melee character will gain healing while pummeling at the target. So your active target should always have Withering Vine and Radiant Spores running on it constantly. Now, what makes life more simple in groups and in dungeons as you go along is when you get this ability, Phytogenesis. It gives a 100% chance to affect the entire grouping of mobs surrounding the target with Radiant Spores. So let's say you have a mob group of 5 that is all huddled around the tank, and the tank is hitting one of them, and you have cast Radiant Spores on that one. The Radiant Spores will also cast on all the mobs around it, which means you don't need to keep replenishing it when you go from mob to mob, which is very, very handy when you have a group that's being taken down pretty quickly, and you don't need to, and you can just move from target to target and pummel away with your Vile Spores to handle the healing, because the Radiant Spores will have already moved onto those targets anyway. Very, very useful. So make sure you get that Phytogenesis pretty much as fast as you can. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. You want it when you're ready to do dungeons, and you'll be ready to do dungeons when you're level 17, 18. So by the time that rolls along, you should try to have gotten that one and this one, Synthesis, or both very, very useful spells. Synthesis is something you will generally use as your target on your tank. Now, I buff the target with the tank with 2 spells. One of them is Synthesis, and the other one is this one down here, Charged Shield, which allows him to do damage while somebody's hitting on him. These 2 I have rolling on the target at all times, the tank that is. And then on the active mob, Radiant Spores and Withering Vine. Withering Vine needs to be replenished from mob to mob, and Radiant Spores, as we said, just jumps from one to the other. Now that's your base spell set. Bloom over here is your single target heal, pretty much the only single target heal that you've got. Very, very useful spell, but much more useful if you get this. Healing Slipstream, once maxed out, will drop the casting time of Bloom by 2 seconds. Now the casting time of Bloom is 2 seconds, so by getting that you make Bloom an instant cast spell. Absolutely necessary. Get Bloom, get Healing Slipstream as early as possible. These are your main oh shit single target heals when your Vile Spores is not doing what it needs to do. Or if your tank is taking an excessive amount of damage that the Vile Spores' gentle sort of healing over time does not heal. Now, in order for all of this to work, you need this, Life-Giving Veil. Life-Giving Veil is a self-buff aura that causes all healing you do to affect all targets within its range, which means that it's a group AoE heal. And it heals up to 10 allies, which is absolutely top-notch, because in the first 50 levels of your playing, you basically will not be encountering any group larger than 5 except in rift attacks. And even then, you are an excellent combat AoE healer because of the Life-Giving Veil, the Vile Spores, and the Radiant Spores, coupled with your Phytogenesis. Really excellent stuff. Alright, so if you imagine how this will work, and later on I will show you a dungeon run with the healing in action, but basically imagine a concept where you are healing by debuffing mobs and then using your combat damage to do heals, and then very rarely doing direct heals. So your single target direct heal, Bloom, your party level direct heal is that one, Flourish. Flourish heals up to 10 allies within 20 meters. Very, very important little detail that, because if you are standing, now when it says 20 meters, it means 20 meters of you. So if you are standing 20 meters away from a party member or say the tank, he will actually not gain healing from this spell. So it's very important that you're always within 20 meters of your group as best possible. So Bloom and Flourish are your single target direct and multi-target direct heals. There is a new spell that I just got called Soul Tether, which I haven't been able to properly test out yet. But basically, according to this description, the mage becomes a spiritual anchor for their ally, reviving them and returning 30% of their health and mana. Now, I take this to mean that it is a combat resurrection. So if a party member actually dies while in combat, you can use Soul Tether to bring him back with 30% of his health and mana intact, which is too cool. Seed of Life is a normal out of combat resurrection where you can just bring the character back again at 30% of health and mana, but can only be used out of combat. Now, Soul Tether has a 5-minute cooldown, so I would imagine you can probably use that once in a combat situation if somebody goes down. After that, the combat will be over pretty much with it. 5 minutes in any case. I'm dying to test this one out. I haven't had an opportunity to do it yet, but it should be fantastic to test out. I will try and see what we can do in a dungeon run. So there we are, Chloromancer, Mage combat healing, an absolutely unique concept in classes or healing classes for the MMO world introduced here in Rift. Mage combat healing, and I am absolutely digging it. I love it. It's a fantastic class to play. If you look at healing rotation, when something during a dungeon, I will generally lead with Radiant Spores, which does not aggro, so you can cast Radiant Spores and it will not put you into combat. And as soon as the tank engages, I follow up with Withering Wine, and then I immediately follow up with Stream of Reclamation, which has a relatively large cooldown time, so you want to get that in early. It delivers a huge amount of damage and therefore a huge amount of health, so this will generally take care of the initial rush of damage that will be hitting the tank. And then I will follow up with pummeling the active target with Vile Spores and Ruin, which is an instant cast damage spell, to most of the liberal healing that happens over time. If anybody is taking an excessive amount of damage that is not handleable by the healing over time, I will plop a Bloom on them, or if the entire party is taking damage, I will plop a Flourish on them, and then rinse and repeat as you go along. Now, in dungeons at my level, as long as the rest of my party is at my level, I've had absolutely no problem whatsoever doing healing as a solo healer in this spec. It's been absolutely excellent, and I highly recommend that you guys also try the Chloromancer class if you have not done so, and get back to me with your thinking on how it went and what kind of strange class combinations you may have had in this, because I'll be really interested in finding out. And make sure you, if you have any opinions on this, that you comment below, because I'll be interested to hear in the feedback on what you guys think about this particular soul combo as well, because it's been a very, very intriguing combination to play. And in my next video we'll be looking at the DPS spec, which took me a good 19 levels to try and figure out which one I wanted, but once again I'm just super happy with it. So we'll get to that in just a second. I hope you enjoyed this view of the Chloromancer healing style. I will follow this up in a later video with the thing actually in action, as opposed to this more in-depth talent view of the soul. So, thank you for watching, everyone. Do comment and like, dislike, and whatnot else that you YouTubers do, and I look forward to bringing you more of this stuff in the days ahead. Thank you, and bye-bye.